Comment Flyby 2025 in the comment section below to be entered into a Steam Key giveaway for Paper Planes by Creekside Interactive. There are 3 flight action games for the PlayStation 2 heralded as a holy trinity by their fans. Even suggesting that they are flawed carries with it an immediate hatred, especially for Ace Combat 5, the second game in the PS2 trilogy. In my opinion, Ace Combat 5 The Unsung War is the weakest game in the franchise's PlayStation 2 releases, and maybe in the franchise as a whole. Now, before you start throwing full wine bottles at your computer screen, let me explain. Admitting something that you like is flawed, in my opinion, is one of the most mature things you can do. Now, just because I'm going to delve into the flaws with the Unsung War doesn't mean I hate it. It's a special game to me personally, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's revisit Namco's Ace Combat 5 The Unsung War. In my Assault Horizon retrospective, I went into the history of the Ace Combat franchise more in depth, but in short, Ace Combat is a series of arcade-like flight action games by Namco Bandai. Or Bandai Namco as they go by now. The series saw its first 3 home releases on the PlayStation 1, and Ace Combat 4 as a PlayStation 2 launch title in 2001. Shattered Skies was groundbreaking for the series. For the first time, players could equip their aircraft with not just one missile type, but special weapons in the form of bombs, rockets, and other air-to-air weapons. Ace Combat 4 also offered new mission types. Whereas in earlier Ace Combat releases, missions were accomplished by destroying simply highlighted targets. Shattered Skies also had more free-roam friendly missions involving destroying as many enemy targets as possible to achieve a preset point count. If the player were to run out of weapons, a rearming system was in place that involved flying across a dotted line drawn across the map. Flying past the line would start a skippable landing minigame. Once complete, the player would rearm and be given the option of changing out his or her special weapons. The game also had a hell of a story, told from the perspective of a young boy experiencing the Usian Continental War. Cutscenes were shown in the form of static art pieces which really captured the atmosphere of the story. Ace Combat 4 was released to worldwide acclaim alongside the PlayStation 2 and would go on to sell over 2.5 million copies worldwide. So, we're off to a good start on the PS2, but what would come next? The development team, then known as ACO4 Project, would evolve into Project Aces, with Kazutoki Kono taking over as director for the next Ace Combat. The goal for the next game was ambitious, to craft a game that not only expanded on the gameplay mechanics of its predecessor, but also delivered a more complex and engaging story. The team wanted to create an immersive experience that combined the thrill of high-speed dogfights with a story-driven approach rarely seen in flight action games. Up to this point, every Ace Combat game since AC2 was set in Usia, a small continent in the middle of a fictionalized Atlantic Ocean. Ace Combat 4's official guidebook gave us the first glimpse at a larger world, one that actually mirrored our own Earth a lot closer than what we would later get. During the development of Ace Combat 5, however, this overworld was revamped, with new continents being created. The player character wouldn't fight for Usia this time. They would be a rookie pilot for the Ocean Federation, a nation heavily based on the United States. Their foe would be from across the Pacific, a fictional nation called Yuktobania, which takes cues from the real Soviet Union. Now, one thing I do want to emphasize is that the nations of Ace Combat never truly have a one-to-one equivalent. Though based on the US and Russia, the new nation would use a multitude of aircraft from various real-world manufacturers. For example, Yuktobania uses a multitude of American, British, and French aircraft while maintaining grounded naval forces of the former Soviet Union. In addition to the new superpowers, the small German-inspired nation of Belka was created to offer a crux of the game's backstory. 15 years prior, the Belkans spurred a world war that ended in their once glorious superpower status, well, being nuked. But we'll circle back to this. While the attempt at a deep narrative was a huge focus of the project, new gameplay elements were included to keep the franchise fresh. The player would have the ability to command a trio of squadron mates to attack targets, protect the player himself, or disperse to engage at will. The game would also see the return of branching missions first seen in Ace Combat 2. This would encourage replayability. To take on these missions, the game boasted a roster of 50 aircraft, most of them from the real world. Each plane was meticulously modeled to capture the look of their real-world counterpart. Thanks to the PlayStation 2's graphical capabilities, the nations of Osea and Yuktobania could be rendered through immersive environments. From sprawling cities and vast oceans to dense forests and mountain ranges, Project Aces could bring the strange, real world to life like never before. The team collaborated with the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra to compose an epic soundtrack containing a multitude of musical genres. In addition to its music, the game featured extensive voice acting with over 18,000 lines of dialogue. It's clear a great deal of effort went into the creation of Ace Combat 5. Since its release in 2004, Ace Combat 5 has sold 1.5 million copies worldwide. While not reaching the same success as Ace Combat 4, the Unsung War kept the series alive, setting the stage for future installments. But what about the game itself? The gameplay is your typical Ace Combat flight action stuff, but you'll quickly notice that the aircraft handle, well, for lack of a better term, rigidly. Ace Combat 4's flight model offered a wide range of angle of attack variations among planes and had very fluid stall physics. Each aircraft had a different flight ceiling as well. Some would cap out around 30,000 feet, while others could push 45,000. Ace Combat 5 does away with all the fluidity, and the aircraft seem to have fixed angles of attack and turns. Not only that, but the in-game ceiling immediately stalls the player, regardless of their speed, at about 31,000 feet. You could be rocketing up at Mach fucking immediately 180 into the ground. Planes also fly straight and level without any variance in attitude, even when going full burner. Again, to bring up Shattered Skies, in that game, the aircraft would shift slightly and even dip at high speeds, which added a layer of realism. The flight model of Ace Combat 5 results in a very simple gameplay loop. Acquire a target, approach said target, and circle around as the target maneuvers at your fixed 10-degree angle of attack until you kill the thing. It's really hard to explain how this feels unless you play it, but if you get a chance, you'll see what I'm talking about. It almost harkens back to Ace Combat 2's flight model. Like all other Ace Combat games, you have a plethora of missiles to attack both air and ground targets, and return from Ace Combat 4 are special weapons. One big step back from Shattered Skies is that each plane only has one assigned special weapon, and oftentimes the weapon isn't even a good match for the aircraft type you have. For example, you would expect an aircraft listed as a fighter to have an air-to-air weapon. Well, guess what? Here's a bomb. In other Ace Combat games, you'll have fighters that get ground attack special weapons, but you have the option to buy additional weapons. If you want to change out a special weapon for an aircraft, you have to fill said aircraft's kill meter by grinding it in missions, then hope that its upgraded variant has a weapon you're looking for. It's a pain in the ass, and it's really just a gimmick to incentivize the player to unlock more of the 50 planes that frankly aren't better enough for the grind. You also lose the return line system in 5, which means you're unable to rearm yourself mid-mission. Now, Project Aces did this to incentivize the use of the new Wingman command mechanic, which allows the player to order War Dog Squadron to cover, attack, disperse, and use their own special weapons. Like many ideas in Ace Combat 5, on paper this sounds great. It was intended to make the player feel like part of a larger air force and allow their pilots to build up a legend alongside them, but of course it just doesn't work for shit. The artificial intelligence for your wingmen in Ace Combat 5 barely functions, and you'll be lucky to see them get a handful of kills in a mission. This becomes a severe problem on higher difficulties during score attack missions, where if you run out of ammo, your wingmen won't be competent enough to attack final mission targets that took 20 plus minutes to get to. Speaking of the score attack missions, they are a huge step back from Ace Combat 4. Look at this map from 04. See how many targets there are? You'd be hard-pressed to wipe out even 2/3 of them in the allotted time. As a comparison, let's look at Ace Combat 5. There's barely anything for you to shoot at. Now granted, there are more enemies that spawn in as the mission progresses, but if the player is good, they'll be finding themselves circling in the void waiting for more enemies to spawn. It's fucking boring. Visuals aside, 5's gameplay itself is a huge decline in quality from its predecessor, but how's the story? In 1995, a world war broke out across the lands of Strange Reel, sparked by the Rald Party-led Belka when it invaded its neighbors. While they nearly cinched victory against the Allied forces, they were pushed back into their own territory. On June 6, 1995, the Belkans detonated 7 nuclear warheads in their Waldreich mountain range, stopping the Allied advance. The victorious Allied powers headed by Osea enacted harsh sanctions against the former superpower, which quickly became a shadow of its former self. In the 15 years that followed, Osea and Yuktobania, the two standing powers, found themselves in a Cold War which ended in the mid-2000s. By the year 2010, Osea had attempted to blunt its military power and instead pour funds into furthering mankind's research into outer space. Programs such as the Arcbird were created in the wake of the Ulysses asteroid disaster, one which caused the Eugean Continental War of 2003 to 2005. Osean President Harling hoped that by 2010, mankind could put aside such crude tools of war for the international bridge into the stars. Of course, it was a fucking pipe dream, for unknown aircraft coming from the Pacific continuously began to harass Osea's Sand Island Air Force Base. Sand Island, a training base, was ill-equipped to handle the onslaught of the mysterious enemy aircraft, resulting in 8 trainees being shot down. That's where you, the player, comes in. You're Blaze, aka War Dog 4. A rookie pilot in the Osean Air Defense Force under command of Hollywood hunk Steve J. Blum, playing Jack Bartlett. Along with Blaze are Chopper, a wannabe rocker who takes aesthetics from Elvis, and Edge, a totally not recycled character by the name of Kei Nagase. The War Dogs are tasked with intercepting an SR-71, which is limping home after being struck by one of Osea's automated SAMs. Upon reaching the aircraft, the force ship is bounced by a flight of MiG-21s, and they rightfully defend themselves.
War Dog Squadron, weapons safe. Hold your fire until further orders.
Wait, hold your fire? What the hell? This is the first we see of Osea's military incompetence. AWACS Thunderhead orders War Dog to keep weapons safe even after the MiGs began firing on them, which is stupid, especially given this is Osean airspace. Regardless, Steve Blum orders you to engage, and the bandits are waxed in mere moments. According to the debriefing, Steve is then punished even though his actions saved the lives of his pilots. The next day, the War Dog pilots are ordered to splash recon drones which had flown over Sand Island. Like before, they are unable to engage any manned aircraft that show up, but they do it anyway. The ship the drones were intending to return to suddenly opens fire on Edge, who is saved by Steve in the last moment. His F-4G swoops in, steals the lock from the enemy missile, and is shot down, leaving his fate unclear. Before a rescue mission can be mounted, the War Dogs are called back to Sand Island upon hearing some grave news. The Yuktobanians have declared war on Osea. The next mission sees Blaze taking command of War Dog Squadron for the first time. Edge, not feeling up to the task for gameplay reasons, tells the player to take over the formation as they near Port St. Hewlett. St. Hewlett is a naval base already under attack by the Ukes who pull a Pearl Harbor-style strike and damage many Osean ships. The aircraft carrier Kestrel is able to make it out to sea and is spared being sunk at anchor. This is also the first mission featuring Captain Snow, a naval pilot with VFA-206 Shorebirds. He'll become important later. The game makes an attempt to show the horrors of war by having the pilots describe bodies floating in the waves, but it just doesn't land given none of this actually renders, leaving it to the player's imagination. In my opinion, it just doesn't fly in the long run, but I see what they were trying to convey. This is a teen-rated game after all. After returning to Sand Island, the War Dogs are forced into the air for a third time in the day as a Uke bombing raid hits at sunset. During the battle, the F-5s you've been stuck with till now launch and intercept the raid. After downing the first wave, a fourth Tiger rolls out of a hangar, piloted by Airman Hans Grimm. He joins up with the squadron and contributes next to nothing, just like the rest of your wingmen. After this mission, the player finally gets access to the hangar where they can purchase aircraft. This is unlike other games in the series in that you're not just funding your own plane, but also the rest of your squadron. I honestly don't hate this feature, but it would be even more effective if your wingmen actually did something in the Gucci new toys you give them. In any case, War Dog Squadron is sent to the Eglin Straits to escort an aircraft carrier meetup between the Kestrel, Vulture, and Buzzard. Oh yeah, all Osean aircraft carriers are named for birds. I kinda like that, honestly. The rendezvous is spoiled, unfortunately, as a ballistic missile attack obliterates the majority of the fleet. Here's our first look at the super weapon of Ace Combat 5, the burst missile launched by the giant submarine Synfaxi. In Ace Combat 4, the Stonehenge projectiles are dodged by flying below 2,000 feet, presenting a challenge with avoiding terrain. In 5, dodging the burst missile is the opposite, requiring the player to pull up above 5,000 feet, making it the easiest super weapon to avoid in the series. Regardless, this is effectively a weapon of mass destruction which knocks out 2 carriers in Osean territory, and the Osean government does nothing about it. Once again, best military ever. The War Dogs are forced to land at Hierlarch Air Base in North Osea, former South Balkan territory. There, they pick up rookie pilots on their way back from Sand Island, but on the way, they stop at McNeely Air Force Base near Bassett Space Center. Returning from Ace Combat 2 is the Mass Driver concept, an elongated ramp designed to accelerate Venture Star space shuttles into orbit. Today's launch is a package to the Arkbird, an orbital space plan originally meant to clear the sky of asteroid fragments from the Ulysses 1994 XF04 asteroid. Of course, this isn't explained in-game at all and is only referenced in pre-release lore. As far as an unaware player would be concerned with, the Arkbird is just a big fuck-off spaceplane commissioned by President Harling with funding from Yukobania to build peace or something. It sort of echoes the real-world Apollo-Soyuz and later International Space Station efforts between the US and Russia. Of course, the Ukes wanted to bust up the SSTO launch as the package being sent to the Arkbird is a laser system. In a mission harkening back to Ace Combat 3, the player is tasked with destroying airborne tanks before they hit the ground, and later to defend the Mass Driver from a cruise missile attack. Fun fact, if you're fast enough, you can fly to the edge of the map and knock out the B-2s launching the missiles. Given War Dog's prowess, the Space Center is protected and the Arkbird receives its laser package. As soon as you get back to Sand Island, you're called to fly again, as a Uke landing force attempts to raid the Osean base. This time, the rookies that were picked up from Hierlarch take part in the battle by flying in circles while the player handles everything, proving that they really are a fit for the Osean Air Defense Force.
If we make it back alive, there's something I want to ask you, if that's alright.
I'm just gonna not answer him. I don't want to get attached. All is going well until a burst missile falls from the sky. Before it detonates, a laser blast from the Arkbird fries it, sparing the Osean pilots.
I just lit up. Missile vaporized in midair.
The Ukes are quick though, for they launch burst missiles in a salvo to overwhelm the laser's interception, and oh no, the Nuggets can't climb above 5,000 feet. The Arkbird responds by firing a laser into the ocean and bringing some Vaxi to the surface, where the player is able to shoot the shit out of it and sink it. The following missions are, to put it lightly, a slogfest. War Dog Squadron escorts a transport plane call sign Mother Goose 1 through the Osean Defense Network, which is stupid because the thing is hauling President Harling. You'd think they would flash IFF to the ground defense system, but in the Osean military's infinite wisdom, they elect to maintain secrecy and end up getting hit by one of their own missiles. Now damaged, the C-5 needs to be guided through the air defense radar system, which appears as a series of rings on the player's radar.
Hey, I see escort fighters!
I thought there weren't gonna be any escorts.
Why would you have your presidential transport fly across hazardous territory over your own defense systems, not flash friendly ID, and not have any escorts? Why would you do that, ever? This is an extremely boring mission capped off by flying in a bunch of circles waiting for the mission to progress after shooting down a few MiGs and deadly windmills in Mother Goose 1's path. Relieving War Dog Squadron is the 8492nd Squadron, whose leader doesn't sound menacing at all.
We observed the emergency landing on our radar. Can you see us? You can leave the rest to us.
You then escort a landing operation on the Uke mainland and eventually go after retreating cargo planes escorted by jammers. During the combat, reports of attacks on a civilian population come over the radio, and for some reason, War Dog gets pinned for the attack. So they go to a trial in the Osean capital of Aured. Now, this scene is especially dumb given that not only an AWACS would have tracked the battle over radar, each plane would have realistically had HUD tapes recording the entirety of the mission. Or maybe the Oseans just don't have such conveniences because they're the worst military in the history of Ace Combat. There are even reports of the 8492nd Squadron being present, but the Tribunal doesn't even acknowledge their existence. Now see, this might be a good time for the War Dogs to explain that the same squadron relieved them during the Mother Goose 1 mission, but for some reason they neglect to do so. In any case, before the jury is out, 2 attacks on Osea take place. One at a civilian airport, and the other at a college town nearby. In order to determine where to send the War Dogs, I can't believe I'm saying this, the commander flips a fucking coin to determine where they're being sent. The face of the coin that is chosen is determined by a yes or no answer to Chopper asking you about some made-up song he likes, and it's just silly. Oh yeah, this is a good time to go over a mechanic in the game to, I suppose, help the player connect with the squadron. Every now and then, you'll have a yes or no option appear on the screen in response to a question. They're pretty much inconsequential and can be ignored, say for anything relating to Chopper's coin song, which will somehow magically determine which side a coin will land on later, and thus choose which branching path you'll take. Now, Project Aces knew they fucked up on this because this feature never came back in a subsequent game. All it does is distract you in the middle of a fight. So one option takes you to the airport, but the more fun option is to go to the college town where you're flying Mirage 2000Ds equipped with a special bomb designed to neutralize nerve gas. If an enemy nation spread nerve gas around a college town in the real world, that would constitute a severe repercussion, but since this is Osea, they keep doing what they're doing, and they keep fighting clean. You strike back at the Yuktobanians, hitting an ammo dump or munitions plant depending on the route you took earlier. Chopper bitches about shooting transport planes, and Edge gets all moody over destroying enemy weapons and killing the same people who literally just performed a chemical attack on civilians. Now, I'm not going to speak for servicemen or anything, and war is a horrible, horrible thing, but real-world pilots tend to not tie up comms on mission when blowing shit up with sulking, why must we fight dribble. In fact, it's often the opposite.
Good kill!
The Arkbird gets disabled by enemy agents, prompting more bad feels for Nagase. It's bad timing, too, for a second Symphaxi submarine appears in the North Sea. The squadron is sent to deal with the submarine Rimfaxi, and at first, they are fearful as the North Sea is where an in-universe demon known as Rosgrees comes from. It turns out the war dogs are the real Rosgrees when they turn the phallic sub into scrap metal. Then we have a few more filler missions. Nagase ends up being shot down on a mission to liberate a prison camp, but is promptly rescued the next day. You choose between a pair of boring point rush missions inspired by Desert Storm, and then you're assigned to do a flyover at an Osean patriotic rally held by the Vice President. Oh, Jesus!
You lucky bastard.
During the performance, a Yuktobanian fighter squadron attacks and an air battle over the city breaks out. During the battle, Chopper's plane is hit, but he stays with the aircraft as he doesn't want to bail out over the city. No matter, there's a large river nearby that he can either ditch into or bail out over. Yes, the river! Don't interrupt me, Nagase! Oh my... Oh my god, dude. Well, he waited too long and his seat doesn't fire. Very cool. I feel nothing, you stupid ass. You didn't have to die that way. Chopper really is a victim of bad writing here, folks. So this next scene always confused me. Immediately after Chopper's death, Old Man Pops and Albert Jeanette, a reporter at Sand Island whom I didn't mention before because he's boring, are looking over wreckage of an aircraft manufactured by the North Osea-owned Grunder Industry. Now, for years I thought this was Chopper's aircraft being looked over after an investigation or something, but if you open the in-game timeline, it's a completely unrelated Uke XO2 Wyvern that was shot down over Sand Island. I don't know why they elected to write this in. Maybe there was a mission that was deleted, but it does little other than to offer exposition for the mysterious former Belkin company. Fuck, we're over halfway there. The now 3 War Dog pilots take part in taking down a Yuktobanian fortress, only to be jumped by the 8492nd on their way home.
92, 8492. I know I've heard that somewhere before. That's right. When we were helping the president's emergency landing, it was the 8492nd who took our place. Yeah, you're right.
Why did it take you so long to remember them, Grim? As it turns out, they are former Belkin fighter pilots working as aggressors for the OADF. Using this as a cover, they've been helping orchestrate the war between Yuktobania and also have a plant at Sand Island in the form of the base's XO, Captain Hamilton.
What?
They're the ones who captured the president, and apparently used Jedi mind tricks to make everyone in the Osean government forget that Harling has been missing for months. My god, can you imagine a government being this stupid? Well, Okay, fair. The War Dogs are labeled as traitors by Hamilton, who locks the base down, prompting them to escape in Pops as Hawk trainers. Pops leads the crew over an island chain used as a scrapyard and eventually loses the 8492nd. To fake their deaths, Captain Snow from the Kestrel intercepts them and instructs the pilots to eject before his Tomcat wastes the trainers. The squadron is then taken aboard the Kestrel, which has been fighting its own little dark age for the past several months. The captain of the ship, Anderson, had figured out the Belkin string pulling himself and had been in communique with Pops, I think. Whatever, we're Naval F-14 pilots now, I'm not complaining. So after being captured, the Osean president had been held in a Belkin castle. Why the Belkins hadn't just shot him is anyone's guess, but Warthog, along with Snow, launched to recover him. Once freed from the Belkins, Harling returns to the Kestrel and recommissions Wardog's squadron as the Ghosts of Rosgrees, inspired by the demon legend. Their aircraft are painted in an edgy black and red scheme that would impress Shadow the Hedgehog himself. From there on, Rosgrees works to undermine the Belkin war machine, first by performing a photo recon mission to determine if they truly have nuclear weapons. At the same time, they find that Belkin aggressors are working with the Yukabanians as well, which help further the war from their side. The next day, the mine that was photographed is destroyed in an airstrike, hopefully bottling the nukes up for good. Rosgrees Squadron then performs a few more filler missions. They destroy the Arkbird, which had been taken over by Belkin agents. They protect a Yukabanian rebel group in dismantling a bomb. And they rendezvous with Steve Blum, who had rescued the Yukabanian Prime Minister Nicanor. Before he was even taken to a prison camp, he escaped and had been working with the Yukabanian resistance. Steve also brought along a Yuk intelligence officer, carrying with her a disc detailing the Belkin plan to use an orbital strike platform called the Solg, which was developed after the Belkin War. The Solg is a massive recoilless rifle in space which can fire both nuclear and conventional warheads. Needless to say, it has to be stopped. As the Kestrel fleet proceeded to bring Nicanor back, they encountered a Yuktabanian fleet which splits upon learning their Prime Minister is on board. Some of the Yuks defect to the Oseans, while others label their Prime Minister as a traitor. During the battle, an Osean fleet gets involved and labels the Kestrel fleet as traitors, and Rosgrees enacts mass fratricide against the Barbet carrier battle group. The next day, the Rosgrees pilots gather before Pops, who lays out a battle plan to take down the Solg facility in North Osea. Hey, we get to go on an infamous Ace Combat tunnel run. Before they launch, however, the Kestrel is hit by a series of anti-ship missiles from the submarine that had survived the previous battle. Before it slips under, the Osean pilots are launched from the Kestrel on their final mission to Sudentor, North Osea. Both Oseans and Yuks come together on the words of Harling and Nicanor. You get to do your tunnel run, Captain Hamilton gets whacked, and everyone prepares to celebrate. But of course, it's not that easy. The Solg was designed to plow into the Osean capital of Alred should communication be lost with the command center. The real final mission proceeds. The Rosgrees is nearly stopped by the Belkin Aces flying S-32s, but they are all blasted before the Solg falls to an altitude where it can be attacked. In a climactic final battle, the Solg is... In a climactic final battle, the Solg is destroyed and its nuclear payload detonates safely over the city. And that's Ace Combat 5, The Unsung War. Fuck me, that was a long playthrough. In fact, I believe it's the longest campaign in the series, not counting the branching paths in the Japanese version of Ace Combat 3. Ace Combat 5's biggest plot-related folly, in my opinion, is pushing a ham-fisted anti-war message, which heavily clashes with the incentives offered by destroying as many enemies as possible for in-game currency, then used for buying better aircraft to destroy more with. Not just that, but most of these planes are officially licensed by Namco, which means that the companies who produce these weapons of war were directly paid by the game's publishers. It just makes the whole war bad message paper thin at the end of the day and comes off as pure hypocrisy. This would also mark the first appearance of Strange Real's ultimate bad guys, the Belkins. I get that they're supposed to be an analog for Nazi Germany, but in every mainline game since 5, the Belkins have been involved in one way or another to throw gasoline on the fire. The evil mustache-twirling Belkins are responsible for the aerial fortress in Ace Combat 6, and in 7 they are the crux of the drone program which the later part of the game centers around. It's lazy writing all for the sake of member berries. I guess that's not an Unsung War issue, but that's definitely a holdover that just will not die in the series. I suppose the Belkins are a MacGuffin to allow for any enemy in-game to not be the real bad guy and push this narrative that peace can always be achieved between two warring parties, but in order to push this narrative, Project Aces has created an entire ethnic group who serves no other purpose than to be a thorn in the side of progress in the world. It's kind of messed up if you think about it. Oh, and miss me with all that Belka did nothing wrong garbage. Belka was written by Project Aces to do everything wrong in the world's problems from 1995 to 2019. Now, I've been doing nothing but jabbing at this game's storyline and pointing out its very apparent flaws, but I do want to detail why this game is still special to me. 20 years ago, I was a little falcon who had played both Ace Combat 2 and 3 for PS1. In the Christmas of 2003, I had received a PlayStation 2, and I was awestruck by the graphical improvement, but I had yet to discover Ace Combat 4 as of yet. Ace Combat 5 is one of the few games in the series advertised on television, and I still remember seeing the awesome pre-rendered ad for the game at my grandparents' house. My grandpa was going to Blockbuster that day anyway to pick out some movies to watch, as myself and my siblings were there visiting for the weekend. He was kind enough to take me to the old rental place, and there it was. Ace Combat 5, The Unsung War. I just had to play it. For the next week I was glued to my PS2, experiencing the story firsthand. It was a remarkable jump from the old PS1 games I was used to, and it felt like the closest I'd get to flying a Tomcat as an 11-year-old. I eventually got that game for keeps on Christmas, and later I played Ace Combat 4. It was after I played Shattered Skies that I started to see some of the cracks in Ace Combat 5, and while I would often replay it, I found myself playing through Shattered Skies more and more. Ace Combat 0, which acted as a prequel to 5, was a step in the right direction. While it was still hampered by 5's flight model, its overall mission design was a vast improvement, cutting down on dead zones and keeping the player engaged. The return line came back for certain missions, fixing the reliance upon inept wingmen, and the clinky window dressing yes and no mechanic was axed. And overall, Zero was a much better game. No matter how good or bad a game ends up being when looked at with a critical eye, I can never turn my back on the good memories Ace Combat 5 gave me. At the end of the day, while it was far from perfect and can even be objectively described as bad in many areas, I still have a soft spot for the Unsung War. It set in motion the tone for following games like Ace Combat 6 and 7, and while I take issue with many of the writing decisions in the series, I can say for certain this is the game that really showed me the Ace Combat world in detail for the first time. I don't know what the next Ace Combat will bring or who we'll be flying as, but I'll be here for it. And I can't wait to fly in the skies of Strange Real again. Thanks for watching, and for those new to my channel, I normally cover real-world aviation history, but I occasionally do enjoy dipping my toes into fiction. If you're interested in seeing more, please don't hesitate to subscribe and like the video. It really helps me out. Thanks again to my patrons. I've said it before, but I'll say it again, you guys really do help keep me going, and it's really humbling to see all your support. A special thanks goes out to my Ace of Aces tier. Thanks to Captain Fantastic, Chuck45, Deuce, Ghoul, Iron, Jake Fuentes, Kodai, Chris Quinn, Pecops, Private Petey, Aspen, Tico, Weefy, and Boats FG. Keep that sun at your back now.